Does everybody remember what happens at the end of chapter 6 of Revelation? There's a question that's asked in there at the end of Revelation chapter 6. Remember, Revelation chapter 6 is the overview of the end times. It's really the book of Revelation in one chapter, all the calamities, all the judgments, including the wrath of God coming back to set up his kingdom. It's all in one chapter. At the end of that chapter, God asks a question. He asks, who shall stand before the Son of Man? Or before the Lamb? It's the same thing. And that's chapter 6. That's how it ends. Okay? And then the rest of the book of Revelation answers that question and goes back over the details of what chapter 6 just told us. It gives us more information. It gives us details. Chapter 7 tells us who shall stand. Are you guys listening? Are you guys ready to study? Are you guys want to pay attention? It's very important to glue this together and tape this together and put the pieces of this together. It helps us to see clearly. Once you start building in the Bible properly, everything falls into place, makes a lot more sense. When you start learning in an inappropriate way, or if your alignment is off in the beginning of your foundational pieces, when you start reading the Bible, you need to lay those first stones properly. Then the book of Revelation absolutely makes a lot of perfect sense. You can really understand the book of Revelation if you have a good foundation from the rest of the Bible. Okay, so that's what we've been trying to do here. By the time we get to this book, it's really not that complicated. It really isn't. So what happens here in Revelation chapter 7 is God's answering, who shall stand? Let me go up a little bit. On the left side, you'll see chapter 6 ending, and it says, he's coming down with his wrath. This is during the wrath. This is after the resurrection rapture. All right, the mountains are falling down. The islands are disappearing. The wrath of the Lamb is coming. This is not the Great Tribulation part. That's already happened in seal 5. That's when that ends. In seal 5, the Great Tribulation is over. Okay, we're talking about seal 6 here. So in between seal 5 and seal 6, that's where we have identified the resurrection rapture actually takes place. So who shall stand during this time? That's the judgment. Who's going to make it through all of this and stand at the judgment seat of Christ? When it says, who shall stand, that's standing before the Son of God at the judgment seat. Because if you can't stand before the Son, guess what? He casts you away. Can I get an amen if you understand that if you're able to stand before the Son of God, if you're able to stand at the bema seat judgment, even if all of your works are burned up, even if you're barely saved as though by fire, if you are able to stand before the Son of God, you will be saved. Now, now he starts to answer that question. Look, his wrath has come down. Who's going to be able to stand through that? Who's going to make it through that? That's what this means. Who shall be able to stand through all that? Or the other alternative is who's going to be crushed and destroyed, cast off, and that's the other option. You're either going to stand before the Son of God and make it through all that, or you are going to, and it's not talking about being left on the earth. It's talking about the eternal quality of your soul. Are you going to stand before the Son of God and make it through this wrath and judgment and condemnation and destruction that's coming upon the earth? Or are you going to be in the other group, the goats, who are cast into eternal fire? So it's asking that question. Chapter 7 answers that by showing us two groups of people that will make it through this. The first group is the woman that we see in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12 talks about two groups of people. Give me a 7 if you've heard me say this before. Now, you don't have to agree with it. Your study in eschatology may be different, but we've identified two groups of people. They're all part of the body of Christ. They're all part of the saints. They're all part of the elect. They're all going to be saved. They're all part of the bride, in my opinion. And there's still different members and different parts of this. Okay, so what we see in Revelation 7 is the same two groups of people that we see in Revelation chapter 12. Two groups of people. Now, why am I going through all this? Because I want you to understand which group you belong to. How many of you know which group you belong to? Because there's a lot of Gentile Christians who think they've become biological, seeds of Abraham when we're really the faithful seeds of Abraham, or the spiritual seeds of Abraham through believing. You become a child of Abraham through faith only, not through a biological bloodline. There is a biological bloodline. I know some people don't understand that. And God brought back that nation out of the dust of the earth and gave them their own homeland back. We're witnessing in our generation Bible prophecy unfolding like the world has never seen, as one of the biggest signs of the end times. Can I get an amen if you understand that the true bloodline of Israel is one of the greatest prophetic signs of the times? Now, yes, they're evil. He's going to purge that. God's going to purge that evil nation. He's going to get his elect out of there. Don't worry about that. Don't let that bother you, that some of the greatest evil people in the world have been Jews. Don't let it bother you that the banking system may actually be owned by Jews. Don't let it bother you that some of the most prominent and influential people in the world who've created communism and all these evil devices and mechanisms have been Jews. You know why? Not even Jews, but Hebrews, Israel, the nation. Why is that? Because God has etched his name into that nation, and he doesn't want the world to forget that that nation is tied directly to the Bible. That nation is tied directly to the true and living God, even though that nation is bearing the unrighteous fruits of iniquity at this point. You think that that's going to change anything? The miracle of God purging Israel is coming. He's going to purge that nation with fire and brimstone. He's going to bring his wrath down upon that nation, and he's going to cast away the wicked out of that nation, just like he does the rest of the world. He's going to save a remnant of that nation. And that can only happen if the nation is here. If the nation is not here, then how can he ever purge, and how can he ever save the remnant? The nation has to be here. So the nation is here right now. So we're not doing a Bible study on Israel and splitting hairs over some of this. What I'm trying to point out is there's two groups. I got on a rant about this because I want you to know what group you belong to. If you were not born a Hebrew, you're going to be of the second group. Now, which group is that? There's a group in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, that is supernaturally protected with food and water and nourishment. They're protected from being killed. Remember, Paul says, some will be left alive. They shall not precede those who have died. The dead will rise first. Then those left alive shall be caught up into the air to meet those forevermore, right? So there are some who are not appointed to die. That's the group you're not part of. If you're a Gentile, you're not part of that group. I don't think, it's quite possible. It is quite possible that the Christians that are the Gentile Christians, it's quite possible that they're going to die. It's quite possible that I'm not saying that this is for sure. It's quite possible that every Gentile Christian who's the real born-again elect will die. I'm not saying that there are people calling themselves Christians who have underground shelters built, who might make it through that time, who think they're going to be raptured, who won't be raptured. It's possible that will happen too. And in fact, all these scenarios may have an element of truth to them. But let me show you real quick the two groups of people. How many of you guys are ready to pay attention to this? And then we'll move on to our other. I don't want to skip it this time. There's something very important I want to show you guys. Give me a 7 if you quickly want to see these two groups of people in these two different chapters. Chapter 7 on the left, chapter 12 on the right. Same two groups of people. One's protected, one's not. One's Hebrew, one is Gentile. That goes to the two witnesses in chapter 11 that are going to be witnessed, the olive tree and the candlestick branch lamps. Those are referring to the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it brings them together, in my opinion. The candlesticks have always represented the church, and the olive trees seem to have represented the Old Testament believers, and that's kind of. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at these two groups. In chapter 7, we see two groups. He sees 144,000, and that could be a generic number because God uses numbers, and then he alternates that within that number, but maintains that number. In other words, there's 12 disciples, but one of them was cast off and another one replaced him. It wasn't the same 12 that began that ended. So the 12 stayed, but the names that filled those spots changed. Just like we see the 12 tribes of Israel alternating the names. Sometimes you'll see Levi, sometimes you'll see the tribe of Dan in the list, sometimes you'll see Manasseh, sometimes you'll see Joseph, and it alternates, but it's always 12. And so here we see 144,000, which could be representative of just the strong number that God's trying to use for his purposes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's only going to be 144,000. It may just simply represent. But all 12 tribes are here. Does that mean the tribe of Dan is not going to be saved? No, it doesn't, because there's Old Testament scriptures that show us. I'm not going to pull it up right now. There's Old Testament scriptures that talk about Dan being saved in the millennial kingdom. I'm not going to get into that right now. Some people think the tribe of Dan's lost and it's tied into the British family, and there's all kinds of fables the Bible warns us about. Don't get involved in these fables and genealogies. The Bible warns us about this, okay? But right here you do see a list of 12, and it's a list of 12 that we've seen in the Old Testament. 12,000 from each tribe, another symbolic number that's very important to God. There may be more children and women, but the point is, there's going to be a remnant of Israel that is elect and is the saints and is the bride and is part of salvation. And it's not the leadership of Israel now, even though they're in there somewhere. They're in there somewhere, right? God's going to purge out those wicked. They're probably hiding. In fact, we're going to see that they do hide, and they are saved and protected, and they are nourished supernaturally, perhaps like Moses calling manna down from heaven. But see, the Gentile Christians in America think that's going to happen to them. Well, I'm going to show you that it's not. Okay, but let's continue here in Revelation chapter 7 on the left, looking at the two groups of people that's going to answer the question in chapter 6 about who shall stand through this before the Son of God. This is one of the groups. Who? The elect of Israel that God's going to save. The remnant of Israel. So all 12 tribes, 12,000 from each tribe. Now, who's the second group that's going to stand before the Son of Man? The Son of Man. Well, the Gentile nations. Everyone else who really truly believes in the Son of God. After this, I beheld a great multitude of all nations, kindreds, and tongues standing before the throne of God, because that's where you go when you die, before the throne of God. We see that in Revelation chapter 6, and now again in Revelation chapter 7. They're praising God, singing songs to God, blessed and glory to God, right? And then one of the elders asked John, who's looking at this, who are these people from all these different tribes? Who are these people? These are they which came out of the Great Tribulation. He goes, John says, I don't know, you tell me. And the man asking John the question answers that question. He says, these are the ones that came out of the Great Tribulation. Out of Great Tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb, which means they were converted. They gave their allegiance. They gave their heart. They put their faith in the gospel. The gospel that was supernaturally protected somehow by the angel in Revelation chapter 14. We don't know how that all works out, but the gospel will still be preached. And yeah, the Satan's trying to shut it down on YouTube and various places, and people are going to be killed for preaching the gospel, no doubt about it. But somehow there's an angel at charge for making sure that the whole world hears this. All right? Now, this is the second group. Now, look what happens to this second group. You guys want to see what happens to this second group? See, they came out of the Great Tribulation, which means what? They died. They're standing before God in heaven. These people are not alive on the earth. They're dead. And he sees them, and then the promise comes that what? They shall hunger no more. That means they died from starvation. They shall thirst no more. That means they dehydrated. They didn't have water. They didn't have food. And they finally got so hot that they just killed over from the elements. They ran in the wilderness. They ran in the caves. They ran in the mountains. They ran out to get away from the beast man, the Antichrist, and the image who's going to be chasing them down. The image is the one probably more dangerous. And they died, right? And that's the two groups that shall stand before the Son of God. Now, how does this tie into Revelation chapter 12? The two groups are in Revelation chapter 12 as well. A lot of people have not made this connection, but it's clear as the nose on your face. Give me a 7 if you want to see how these two groups correlate and connect to the two groups, or are the same groups that we just read in chapter 7. Chapter 12 on the right. I'm going to paraphrase, but you read this chapter yourself, because I don't need all of this chapter to show you that, but I'm going to start at the beginning here real quickly and paraphrase. All right. Oops. Chapter 12. All right. Chapter 12. Okay, there's a couple of visions in heaven. One's the great dragon, but the woman is the first vision. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman. Now, this woman is protected. We're going to read about it as we get down into this same chapter here. The woman is supernaturally protected with food. See, with food is different than dying from hunger. See, the other group, the second group in Revelation chapter 7, died from hunger. Well, we're going to see in this chapter that the woman has food. Okay? Now, a woman clothed with the sun. This has been identified symbolically as the Hebrew nation, and you can people can dispute on the different tribes or whatever, but it's clear to me that this is the elective of Hebrew, the bloodline, the 12 tribes that are supernaturally protected with food, clothing, and shelter, that the other group was not. Chapter 12 explains that to us in more detail. All right, she had a child, right? And that's Jesus. And from that child was a remnant of her seed. Through Jesus, there was children of God born. How many of you understand that through this baby, we're going to see down in this chapter a remnant of her seed? Of whose seed? The woman. Who's the woman? Hebrew nation of Israel gave birth to a child, and that child gave birth to a remnant of the other Gentile nations. This is how it works. Okay? And there appeared another woman, the dragon, and we're going to get into the dragon too much, but he's trying to get this woman. He's trying to devour this woman. He tried to devour her son, but he was harpazo, raptured up into heaven. That's what the word caught up means, right? And the woman fled into the wilderness. The woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared of God that they should feed her 3.5 years. 1,260 days is 3.5 years, right? And then it gets into the war. We don't need these couple of chapters here about Satan being kicked out of heaven, coming down to earth for that time period where he's got full wrath, full power, and almost full freedom to do whatever he wants, but he can't get the woman. Who can he get, though? Well, what the other group in Revelation 7 say? They came out of the Great Tribulation. They died in the Great Tribulation, so he goes after them. Now look what it says here in chapter 12. He can't get the woman, all right? So okay. And it says right here, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they didn't love their lives unto death. So somebody's going to be dying, but it's not this group. The woman's protected with food. There's a place for her that she should be fed there. She fled into the wilderness, and there's a place of protection for this woman, right? Okay, is that you? Is that the Christians over here in America? Is that the Gentile nation Christians? No. Okay, let's continue to prove that as we go down a little further here. The devil's come down with great wrath, and the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth. He persecuted the woman, which brought forth the man-child, and the woman was given 2 wings of an eagle that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she should be nourished for 3.5 years. Now, it's using a different phrase. A times is another 2 times. A time is 1 year. Times is more than 1 year. That's 2 years. And a half a time is a half a year. Okay, we can show you that and prove that and break that all down, but that's not this Bible study. It's the same. 1,260 days is the same time period as a time times and half a time, and we've shown that and demonstrated that. It's true. Okay, so he can't get the woman. She's protected. There's 2 places in Revelation chapter 12 that show us this. and give us the time period. Right here, she's nourished again. It set it up here, didn't it? It set it up here that she has food. It's repeating that. All it's doing is repeating that information down here to make sure you understand that this woman is not going to be hurt. Okay? And a serpent was cast out of his mouth. He tried to get her, but God protected her with the earth. She was supernaturally protected. God even used the earth to open up and swallow the forces, which is called water, poured out by the Antichrist after the woman. Armies were coming after the woman, and the earth opened up and swallowed the armies. That's what I see happening here. So the dragon was very mad with the woman. Look what it says in 17. The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to do what? Brothers and sisters, what did he go do? He couldn't get her, so what did he go do? He went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Who is that? Which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. Who is that? Well, it's the second group in Revelation chapter 7. Those that came out of every kindred, tongue, and nation. Those that were starved to death. These that are come out of the Great Tribulation. Of every kindred, tongue, and nation. A great multitude come out of all nations. Right there. That's the remnant of her seed. Right here. So we see two groups in Revelation chapter 7. Give me a 7 if you could see this. I'm going to move on. Two groups in Revelation chapter 7. The Hebrew remnant and the Gentile remnant. In Revelation chapter 12, we see a woman that's supernaturally protected, the one that gave birth to Jesus. Jesus was Hebrew, come out of that nation. And those that come from Jesus, the rest of the nations are the remnant of her seed. We see one group protected with food and nourishment. We see another group that is not protected and dying. So there you go, brothers and sisters. The point is, more than likely, and I'll conclude where I started, more than likely, you're not going to have money to pay your bills at some point. More than likely, you're not going to have enough food at some point. And you are the remnant of her seed if you're a Gentile. And you're more than likely going to die from your faith, from believing in the truth. So we have to be ready for that. And being lukewarm is not being ready. This is the battle of my life right now. I do not want to be lukewarm. I do not want to be lukewarm. I want to be ready for this. Boom. Right there. I want to be ready for that. Right there. I want to be ready. I don't want to think I'm ready and not be ready.